Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Experiencing the Self-Care. I think today we'll kind of take on the concept of problem solving with self-care. Now, it's very good to understand that human beings are essentially problem solving uh, organisms or entities. So when we look at a person's personality, this is a solution to a life that they've lived. When we look at their lifestyle, this is a solution to the life that they've lived. If we take a look at their temperament, this is a solution to the life that they lived. If we took a look at their job, passions, and understandings, these are solutions to a life that they've lived. A bad habit is not really a bad habit, it is essentially a solution to a life. You got it, they've lived. So, more often than not, what we don't ask is what are we trying to solve with our personalities, with our lifestyles, with our habits? And in this way, we get stuck. If we take a really historical look at things real quickly, Socrates' philosophy, this was a solution to a life lived. We take a look at the Renaissance. This is a response or solution to a period in time that was lived. If we take a look at the hippies, if we want to call them that, this is also a response to a era of time where life was lived. The 20th century psychological boom, if you want to call it something, was also a response to life lived. In that way, was it a response to the two world wars, depression, and stock market crash? I think those were definitely contributors to the power of that era in psychology and mental development and all those other kind of things. Ultimately, these things, these expressions of a life lived, need to follow through more than their just emotional initial response. So always there's going to be something that kind of changes how people are already thinking to a different level of thinking. This is kind of a revolution, or we can call it an emotional response to whatever challenges are happening. Now, we have that in the way of uh, our youth today. If we really want to look into that, we can say that the millennial generation is a solution to the previous generation's way of living. In fact, uh, there are a lot of things that we didn't really address in previous generations that are being kind of having to be dealt with by the millennial generation. And this is why they have very little tolerance to things that are not true, things that are not supportive in nature, things that are not, um, let's say, emotionally um, viable, things that are not restorative in nature. Uh, they have very strong responses to these things. And why is this? They're essentially the, we'll say, the first generation of the kind of history of mankind in a way that they can only, I shouldn't say only, but mainly see things in the emotional realm. We'd say that the generations before were more viewing things in a logical way. So they're not taking into consideration the emotional cost and or the mental cost of something. They're saying that I will do my job at all costs. And in this way, there used to be a certain kind of respect that a person had for working a job, and this respect was kind of the um, solution to working against one's mental and emotional nature. In fact, if I gain this respect, then that is equal to me in the cost that I am paying mentally and emotionally. Obviously, that is not a true statement, but it was a way of solving for that pressure. Now, the younger generation does not have the same social, let's say, pressure as the other generation did. In fact, they have tremendously more social pressure on their way of kind of seeing themselves as who they are. And in this pressure relationship, they must solve for the emotional side of things. We cannot give them particularly logical solutions that will be viable in their way of looking at life. Ultimately, we can see that this millennial style of seeing things does affect their parents, in the sense that their parents can see the validity of the challenge on mental health now. That was always a challenge before. Why is it so prevalent now? The younger generation has reflected to the older generation, as always, the things that we were missing. And in that way, now feeling that, yeah, you know what, I am under a lot of mental stress, we start to validate the truth. It was always there. Now we can see it. Now it has to be overcome with a new solution. So we try to take the mental pressure off of situations, relieve that stressor for the younger people, but they're not seeing it in a way really of mental challenges. They're seeing it in the way of emotional challenges. This way, there is a miscommunication between the two generations, even though they're seemingly solving for the same thing. Now, this ultimately always seems like a miscommunication. The parents are saying, this is the mental health thing you should do for that. And the children are saying, here's the emotional challenge that I'm seeing. And that mental thing is not solving for my emotional complaint. And in this way, we have kind of a breaking down of the kind of family unit, where both people are frustrated and not getting the help that either of them need. And essentially, the result is that there needs to be a new solution. Now, again, this solution has to be one that can speak both languages, has to be one that can kind of compensate or kind of solve the issue of the past challenges that have just been passed down and not addressed. It has to be in a way of restoring a kind of equilibrium within the family unit, within the individual. And in that way, we are solving for, you got it, self-care. Now, as before, previous generations could do without this thing on a certain level because there's like pseudo versions of it. This new generation, the millennials, must have it. It is a need. It is a necessity. It is not something that can be passed over. In this way, if we don't meet this need, there will be strong repercussions, as we're already seeing, and workplaces and places of school will also have to start feeling this need. We will not be able to escape without doing the self-care thing. That being evidently true, let's start trying to solve with this self-care perspective of things. In that way, kind of legitimizing the true situation as it is. We have to start restoring things. We have taken so much away from the human resources that we have. We've burdened our minds, emotions, and bodies to extreme extents, and we must start to now cultivate an environment that supports the regeneration of the human being, starting with the human part, meaning the heart part of the person that is having a living experience. We can say whenever we're going to bring about this experience, this humanistic style of dealing with things, as per Dr. Carl Rogers' perspective on helping an individual become more themselves, creating that environment that is truly nourishing to the individual, we have to start taking these steps. We can't get away with not doing it. That is pretty much the main point I'm making. And to do so, we have to start opening ourselves up to a little bit of vulnerability. Let's be human with each other. Let's put back the respect in the sense of honoring the individualism of a person, but seeing that the entirety of all people want to feel appreciated and accepted from them, from the standpoint of self-validation. This is a little bit different than somebody just saying, you did a great job, therefore you need to see that and continue. That is a mental health way of solving things. You need to say that, are you experiencing this good job that you're doing? And in that experience, the person then takes responsibility from that. And that is the emotional solution. And then when you say, hey, you're doing a good job, we have something to build on. Then we hit the mental realm. Yeah, actually, you're right. I've seen through my past jobs or experiences or situations that I have been solving those things correctly. And mentally, I know that. So now I'm a little bit more firm in my conviction. And now we can move on to the kind of seeking that experience. When you seek that experience, then you have to reorient the character, which again is the solution to the challenges that one is facing. We can orient this to more of a growth aspect. Now we're seeking things that improve us and not just staying away from things that are vulnerable or new, or I say vulnerable in the sense of not knowing that it's safe to do the thing, but not necessarily there being a risk outside of just the immediate challenge. It's not at risk to your life, it's just a risk to the fact that you might not do it perfectly. So more of your ego or persona, that is the risk. It's not the risk of your own being. So we have to be able to take those things on and survive that easily, and then keep building this thing so that we see that we're not just solving to survive, we're solving to live. And in that way, we solve for the fulfillment of the person. And in that way, we can really enjoy this thing called life. Hopefully, I didn't make that too challenging to kind of ride the wave of understanding. In the way that I'm speaking, I'm talking about the kind of logical, historical perspective, as well as the emotional points that are very powerful to be acknowledged properly, as well as the mental concepts that kind of reside in the whole thing. And I'm giving this all to you so that you can go out and have your own physical experience and see, is Noel right, wrong, a little bit off? If so, I will ask questions, get clarification, and therefore build on my way of solving for whatever problems I may face in the future. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.